And what's happened over the last 30 years has been an incredible amount of improvement and scaling of how the transistors work and the processors that are built. So Moore's law is well known, fairly famous, that describes that an observation, the number of transistors on microchips doubles every 2 years, roughly. And this is held fairly consistently from the 70s into the 2000s, into the 2015s. And that's done through increasing the density, the number of transistors on a chip, by finer and finer and smaller and smaller line width on the optical lithography used in the fabrication, as well as in parallelization. So through 2010, every 18 months or so, there was almost a halving of the line width for the lithography that allowed you to increase the density of the transistors from tens to thousands to millions to billions. I think you can see some of the most recent chips have had on the order of 50 billion transistors, which is incredible. And so it allowed for coordination and planning. The semiconductor industry is really important for the lithography manufacturers to be knowing the roadmap that Intel and AMD and others and NVIDIA were planning, and so they could have a lower cost development and rollout, and increasing the complexity of the computations that could be done. So this has powered the internet revolution. It's driven down the cost and allowed us to really scale up and have these chips today that can run an incredible number of computations every second. Until around the 2010, 2005 timeframe, the frequency of the clocks of the processors increased as well. So you went from hertz to megahertz to gigahertz. Now it's fairly stable from 2 to 3 gigahertz for common processors. So you're not getting an improvement in speed, and you're not getting today finer line widths, because you're down to almost 10, below 10 nanometers into the angstroms, which is the size of an atom. And so what's happened in the last 10 years has really been scaling up through parallelization, having multiple processors on a chip that give you effectively more transistors per processing unit. But now we're seeing a lot of challenges to Moore's law. And Moore's law was tracking that improvement in processor capability with a growth in energy. And you can see this chart shows the electricity consumption on the vertical axis and the year on the x-axis, showing a fairly gradual, stable increase, predictable, of energy consumption in terawatt hours per year, which is a huge number. And until there's a jump in around 2010, as there was parallelization of the processors and more heat generation from energy consumption. But really the last few years, especially with the AI boom since 2013 and ChatGPT, there is now an exponential increase in the energy consumption because of the scaling of the number of chips, the density of transistors, the power required, the heat removal required to power these chips. So Moore's law, which has powered the growth of so many applications and health-saving remedies and design capabilities over the last 30 to 40 years, has now turned into a risk, a danger, a challenge of how do you actually provide enough power to scale up the chips. And we're seeing that in a lot of the news around AI. And so that's a big challenge today. The data center and supercompute designers are looking at these energy consumptions and thinking of how in the world am I going to power this? In the past, data centers would be placed by cheaper energy sources. It could be solar, it could be hydro in Oregon and Washington. But now that's not even sufficient. And so it's become a huge challenge. The good news is that there is a solution in the form of quantum computing. So it won't be the only solution. We'll definitely need more energy. We need to make the classical chips more efficient. We need to make the algorithms more efficient so they require less computations. But quantum computers have already been proved to be more efficient for some algorithms than classical computers. As an example of that, in 2019, Google did the quantum supremacy demonstration, showing that you could scale up a quantum processor from tens and 20s of qubits to over 50 and have it still function and do computations that are beyond what a classical supercomputer can do. And there were two metrics that we looked at in that demonstration. One was the time to solution advantage, and that was the one that was published. But we also looked at the energy advantage of how much energy was required to run the Sycamore computation in 300 seconds versus energy required for using the Summit supercomputer. But the problem was, it's many years were projected to be required. And so in fact, we published the time to solution advantage. It was very concrete. It was a well-accepted metric, kind of horse race. But the energy advantage was 2,000 times higher. So 5 kilowatts versus 13 megawatts is an example for a figure of merit. And so you can see that the time to solution was awesome to see. It's a race. Classical algorithms improve, classical hardware improves. And so we've seen the last 4 years leapfrogging, where there's a demonstration of a quantum computation that is beyond what a classical supercomputer can do. And then there's improvements in the algorithms, improvements in the classical resources, so that now it's no longer claimed to be advantage, but then more results are shown on the quantum computers. And so it's a healthy, nice competition. But the energy advantage, I think, has never really fallen away. And that's one that will be durable for some tasks. On the right, you can see an estimate of the scaling of the energy consumption. And there's talk of this quantum energy advantage, which is the energy consumption of the quantum algorithm. So classical computing scales exponentially with that problem size n, but you have a sub-exponential scaling for quantum computers. And so you can see a place where there's error correction, meaning you have reliable computations, but you've actually shown that you can use a lot less energy to run the same computation. So this is great news. It's important to keep in mind, and it's a call to action of let's accelerate our plans to leverage the quantum resources, to integrate them into hybrid computational environments so you can take advantage of this. Now, quantum computers are not faster at every calculation, and so it's going to be a subset. There may be algorithms solving a real problem today where 90% is run on a classical supercomputer and 10% on a quantum computer. But you're going to have a time to solution advantage, you're going to have an energy advantage as well, and so you're going to help reduce the energy demands for these larger computations.